Okay, so when you picture the archetypal magic mushroom, your mind probably jumps straight to, the classic storybook image.
Yeah, that bright red cap, white spot.
Exactly. Maybe a little gnome sitting on it. That's the classic Amanita muscaria, right? The European fly agaric.
Right. But if you're here in North America, specifically say northeastern U.S., midwestern U.S., eastern Canada, you're actually much more likely to run into its cousin. Equally fascinating, maybe less famous.
Okay.
Amanita muscaria variety guessowii. It trades that classic Rudolph red for this really vibrant sunny yellow or sometimes yellow-orange. But it carries all the same potent chemistry and, well, all the deep, strange history, too.
And that chemistry, wow, it seems to be driving this massive surge in interest right now. You see it all over the internet, these unregulated markets popping up.
It really is.
So our mission in this deep dive, looking at the sources you gathered, is to really unpack this American yellow fly agaric. We need to separate the folklore, and yes, we are talking Siberian shamans, berserkers, maybe even Santa sleigh origins.
Separate that from the actual science, which can be kind of frightening sometimes.
Yeah.
And definitely from the regulatory warnings that are now coming out. This is a mushroom that's just notoriously misunderstood.
Profoundly.
And if you handle it wrong, prepare it incorrectly, it's genuinely dangerous.
It really occupies this extremely weird, narrow space in pharmacology. It sits right between being a genuine neurotoxin and potentially something with therapeutic use.
A fine line.
A very fine line. Our sources are crystal clear on this. You need profound caution. We're here to report impartially on the history, the science. We are not endorsing anyone consuming this.
Absolutely. Absolutely a critical point. Okay, now that the mission's clear, let's handle the logistics quickly. If you appreciate deep dives like this one, please do like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. It helps.
It really does.
And yes, clicking those affiliate links you see in the show description, that helps fund our research. Same goes for suggesting new topics for future deep dives in the comments below. We actually read those.
We do. Okay, business done. Let's get back to the forest floor. How exactly do we spot this thing? What does it look like?
Right. Well, the structure is really key for this whole group, no matter the cap color. VAR, guessowii. It has that distinctive yellow to yellow-orange cap. Usually it's covered in these white, kind of warty patches.
Okay.
Those are just remnants, leftovers from the universal veil that covered the mushroom when it was really tiny, like an egg. And it sits on a white stem, usually with a pretty noticeable skirt-like ring around it.
But you mentioned earlier when we were prepping that the feature you absolutely cannot miss.
Yeah.
It's right at the very base. Why is that so critical?
It is the absolute cue, especially for telling it apart from some smaller lookalikes that aren't psychoactive. The base of the guessowii stem, it's bulbous. It swells out dramatically.
Right.
And it has these very distinctive, shaggy, concentric rings of tissue. Sometimes people call it the vulva. It looks shaggy, like rings stacked on the bulb.
Rings. Got it.
You find it mostly late summer, fall. It likes to grow under specific trees. Pines, spruces, sometimes aspens or birches, and kind of fitting for the American variety, it was named after a Canadian botanist, Hans Guusseau.
Okay, so shaggy rings, big size yellow cap, check, check, check. But we absolutely have to talk about the danger. Foraging any Amanita. It sounds like nature loves to play tricks here.
This is the gravity of the situation really demands respect. I mean, sure, some other yellow Amanitas, like Amanita flavoconia, they're smaller. They just don't have those thick, shaggy basal rings. That's one thing.
Okay.
But the truly terrifying risk, confusing guessowii with a yellowish or maybe greenish form of the deadly death cap, Amanita phalloides.
And that's not just a bad trip. That's potentially fatal. What's the key difference there between the deadly one and our yellow friend?
Generally, death caps have a different kind of base structure. It's more like a sac, a distinct cup-like sac, the vulva, that the stem comes out of, not those shaggy concentric rings like muscaria.
But tricky to tell sometimes.
Especially for a novice. Or if the mushroom is young or damaged, it can be really hard to tell. Our sources mention these just heartbreaking cautionary tales, often involving immigrants who mistake Amanita muscaria for edible mushrooms that look similar back in their home countries.
Oh, no.
Maybe they think it's something like the prized edible Amanita hemiboffa. The universal takeaway here is, if you don't have 110% certainty on every single identifying feature, especially those shaggy basal rings, you just have to leave it alone, period.
That caution feels absolutely necessary. Okay, let's shift gears a bit from finding it to using it, because the history here is incredibly rich. Few fungi seem to have woven themselves into human culture, quite like the fly agaric.
Indeed. I mean, the most extensive, the oldest documented use we know of is from Siberia, stretching back millennia.
Wow.
Indigenous tribes there, like the Koryak people, they revered this mushroom. They saw it as an entheogen.
And okay, break that down for us.
Sure. It just means a substance used specifically to generate a spiritual or mystical or religious kind of experience. Shamans used it to induce trance states, communicate with the spirit world, that kind of thing.
Okay. But if the raw mushroom has those nasty side effects you mentioned, the twitching, the nausea, what's the deal with that, frankly, bizarre urine recycling tradition we always hear about? There has to be a chemical reason, right?
Oh, there absolutely is. It sounds strange to us, but it was actually very pragmatic, chemically logical even. See, the raw mushroom has those two main neuroactive chemicals we'll get into.
Right.
The one they were actually after, the main hallucinogen, muscimol, it passes through the human body and gets excreted in the urine, largely unchanged. So by drinking the urine of someone already intoxicated, they were essentially getting a pre-processed dose. It often resulted in a much milder, cleaner high with fewer of those really unpleasant side effects from the other toxin.
That makes profound sense, especially in a tough environment, like a natural purification process.
Yeah.
And the story goes beyond humans, doesn't it? The reindeer connection.
Ah, yes, the famous Siberian lore. Apparently, domesticated reindeer would actively seek out either the mushrooms themselves or, well, the potent yellow snow. And they'd prance about, clearly intoxicated, in a stupor. The Koryak people sometimes even used this, took advantage of the reindeer being drunk to corral them more easily.
That is a remarkable image. A true cultural connection linking humans, animals, and the fungus.
It really grounds the folklore, doesn't it?
It does. Now, before we dive deep into the chemistry, let's quickly touch on the common name, Fly Agaric. That sounds less spiritual.
Oh.
Nothing to do with hallucinations or reindeer.
Correct. Nothing at all. That name points straight to its use as basically bug spray, insect control. It's documented way back, 13th century. Scholars like Albertus Magnus wrote about it.
How did they use it?
People would just mash up the caps, break them into pieces, and drop them in a saucer of milk. Flies are attracted to the milk, they drink it, and the toxins either stupefy them or kill them outright.
A primitive fly trap.
Pretty much. The toxic compounds we're about to discuss, muscimol and ibotenic acid, they're the active insecticides. So yeah, a toxic mushroom that doubles as pest control.
Wild. We should probably briefly note, too, that some cultures did find ways to eat these, right? Eastern Europe, Japan. But it sounds risky.
Extremely risky. Yes, historical accounts show some cultures developed methods. It involved really extensive detoxification, like multiple rounds of boiling, and crucially discarding the water each time to leach out the water-soluble toxins.
Okay.
It shows ingenuity, sure, adapting to what's available. But we have to emphasize this is not something recommended today. Way too dangerous.
Absolutely clear. Okay, let's get to the core experience then, the pharmacology. You described the effect earlier as a wild roller coaster, and the reason you said is it works completely differently than, say, psilocybin. What's the mechanism? What creates this sort of dual, unpredictable high?
Yeah, wild roller coaster is a good way to put it. What's fascinating and kind of scary is that the effects are driven by these two main neuroactive compounds that almost compete with each other inside your brain. It's like a pharmacological tug of war.
Okay, so let's start with the one people are generally seeking, muscimol. What does that do?
Right, muscimol, that's the principal psychoactive component here. Its mechanism is pretty well understood. It's a potent agonist, meaning it activates the GABA receptor in the brain.
GABA, that's the calming neurotransmitter.
Exactly. GABA is the brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. So think of muscimol as a powerful sedative or tranquilizer. It basically turns down the volume on neural activity. That's what leads to those desired effects. Deep sleep, euphoria, maybe those lucid dream states.
Okay, turns down the volume, got it. And then there's the troublemaker, ibotenic acid. What's its role?
Ibotenic acid is actually muscimol's precursor. It's the prodrug. But chemically, it does the opposite. In stark contrast to muscimol, ibotenic acid is an agonist, a trigger for glutamate receptors.
And glutamate is excitatory.
Highly excitatory. It ramps things up. This compound is what causes all the really unpleasant, stimulating, and potentially neurotoxic effects. The muscle twitching, the tremors, that awful nausea, the agitated confusion or brain fog.
Yep.
It basically puts your nervous system into overdrive.
Wow, okay, so one calms, one agitates. The key then to transforming this mushroom from something potentially horrible into something manageable or even spiritual relies entirely on getting rid of that ibotenic acid or reducing it.
Precisely. You need to reduce that ibotenic acid load significantly, and that's where preparation comes in. How do traditional methods and even modern ones achieve this chemical switcheroo?
Yeah, how does that work?
The process is called decarboxylation. It sounds technical, but it's simple chemistry. Traditional methods, thoroughly drying the mushroom or heating it or boiling it, are crucial. Heat basically strips a carbon atom off the ibotenic acid molecule, and that chemical change converts it, purifies it into the much more desirable, much more stable muscimol. This is the simple chemical reason behind that modern mantra you sometimes hear. Detoxify to mollify.
It makes sense. Detoxify the ibotenic acid to get the mollifying muscimol.
Exactly. If you skip that crucial preparation step, you get the full force of what's known as the Pantherin syndrome, named after a related Amanita, Amanita pantherina. It's that true roller coaster. Starts with agitation, maybe delirium, hallucinations, followed eventually by heavy drowsiness, somnolence, exhaustion.
So the agitation is the ibotenic acid winning early.
Pretty much. And the eventual sloopiness is the muscimol finally taking over as the ibotenic acid perhaps gets metabolized or converted.
And this unique GABA action, this push-pull, is that also linked to the legendary Alice in Wonderland syndrome people report?
Yes, very likely. That's that strange perceptual shift where objects can appear much smaller than they are. That's micropsia or much larger micropsia, like Alice shrinking and growing. It seems to be a really signature, highly memorable effect linked to this specific kind of GABAergic stimulation.
Fascinating. Okay, this brings us right up to today, the 21st century. Because unlike psilocybin, Amanita muscaria isn't federally controlled in the U.S. That created this legal gray zone. And interest exploded. You mentioned Google searches were up, 114% between 2022 and 2023?
That's right, a huge spike.
So what are people trying to do with it now? What's the modern trend?
Well, the dominant trend seems to be microdosing. People taking really tiny amounts, maybe 0.1 to 0.3 grams of the dried mushroom, or using tinctures, sometimes extracts that claim specific dosages.
What are they hoping to achieve with these microdoses?
Users are reporting mostly anecdotal benefits, things like chronic pain relief, getting better sleep, managing stress, maybe reducing generalized anxiety.
Okay, anecdotal reports. But if we connect this back to the science we just discussed, is there actually a kernel of truth there? Does the pharmacology support any of those claims?
You know, it actually does. The potential is definitely rooted in the pharmacology. Since muscimol is a potent GABA agonist, it naturally functions as a sedative. So the idea that it could help with sleep or anxiety isn't far-fetched.
Right.
And animal models have indicated genuine potential for pain relief, analgesic effects, and anxiety reduction, anxiolytic effects. There's research, for example, looking at its use for nerve injury pain, neuropathic pain. So the idea of a mild, maybe non-addictive sedative that could help with pain and sleep, it's scientifically plausible.
Okay, so plausible potential. But then,
Yeah.
why did the U.S. FDA step in? They issued warnings and eventually, you said, implemented a ban on using it in certain products. What went wrong?
Yeah, the issue was really two main things: a serious lack of safety data, and frankly, rampant consumer deception in that gray market.
How so?
Well, because it wasn't illegal, you saw this huge boom in commercial edibles, gummies, chocolates, extracts, often with really misleading labels. Many sellers were kind of implying they were a legal high, a legal psychedelic alternative to psilocybin, which chemically they're fundamentally not.
Completely different mechanism.
Completely different. Sedative versus classic psychedelic. That's problem one. Problem two is that the therapeutic window, the difference between a dose that might calm you down and a dose that sends you into delirium or makes you sick, is extremely narrow.
Ah, tricky dosing.
Very tricky, uncomfortably close. So because of these safety concerns, the misleading marketing, the reports of accidental poisonings, and just the lack of solid safety data for putting this stuff in food, the FDA acted. By December 2024, they outright banned using Amanita muscaria and isolated muscimol in commercial food products.
So the sort of grassroots enthusiasm for this mushroom's potential just ran headlong into these necessary regulatory hurdles, basically trying to protect consumers from a potent, unpredictable compound being sold irresponsibly.
Exactly right. The potential science might be there, maybe, for careful use, but the preparation is critical, the dosing is critical, and the regulatory environment finally had to catch up to the dangers of an unregulated toxin being marketed essentially as a wellness product.
Yeah.
Modern guides, the responsible ones, really stress this now. This is not psilocybin. You're calming your nervous system down, potentially. You're not, expanding your consciousness in the same way at all.
That distinction is crucial. Okay, well, that brings us towards the end of this deep dive.
Mm.
Today, we've really covered a lot of ground. The vital identifying features of Amanita muscaria var, guessowii, especially those non-negotiable shaggy basal rings.
Absolutely key.
Its incredibly deep cultural history, touching on shamans, reindeer, even fly traps.
Yeah.
And its unique chemical personality, driven by that tug-of-war between the sedative muscimol and the excitatory ibotenic
The
acid.
balance. Yeah.
And its journey, really, from this ancient intoxicant to a modern, heavily scrutinized wellness trend.
Mm-hmm.
It just shows how much mystery is still packed inside the fungal kingdom.
It really does. And, I'll leave you with maybe a final thought on that very mystery. While we've been calling this Amanita muscaria var, guess what all this time, the world of mycology, mushroom science, is moving fast, especially with genetic research. Scientists are increasingly thinking that Amanita muscaria isn't really just one species. It's probably a whole complex of closely related but distinct species.
No kidding.
Yeah. So our starry yellow mushroom, it might actually get a brand new official Latin name soon. Maybe something like Amanita chrysoblema var. Guessowii. Taxonomy is always evolving.
Huh. I guess a mushroom by any other name
Yeah.
can still make you see flying reindeer.
Something like that.
Well, thank you so much for guiding us through that complex world, and thank you for joining us on this deep dive into mycology and mystery. Keep learning, keep exploring safely, and we'll catch you next time.